The storm was already getting bad by the time the train pulled in. I remember standing there on the platform, and every car in the station lot was gone. No taxis, no ride shares, nothing. My place wasn't far, 15 minutes on a normal day, maybe 20 in weather like that. So I told myself I'd just walk it. I didn't want to, but the alternative was standing in that freezing station until morning. I shoved my hands in my pockets and pushed into the storm. Visibility was barely a few yards. Streetlights were just blurry circles of yellow hanging in the air like floating planets. I stuck close to the sidewalk and kept moving. A few minutes in, I noticed someone standing ahead of me. At first, I thought it was a mailbox or a lamppost because it wasn't moving. But as I got closer, the shape became clearer. It was a man, a tall man, just standing there in the middle of the sidewalk. What froze me for a second wasn't the fact that he was out there so late. It was how he was dressed. He had on a Santa outfit, not the clean mall Santa kind. The suit looked faded and worn down, like it had been pulled from the back of a thrift store bin. The red wasn't really red anymore, more like dirty maroon. The hat drooped to one side, and the beard, if you could even call it that, looked like someone glued cotton balls to a chin strap. He didn't turn as I walked past. He didn't look at me. He just stood there, his head slightly down, snow piling on his shoulders. I figured maybe he was waiting for a ride, or drunk, or just weird. Either way, I kept moving. By the time I reached my street, the storm had gotten worse. I hurried inside, slammed the door, and locked it. The warmth hit me instantly, and for a moment, I felt relieved. I changed into warm clothes and went to the kitchen to make some coffee before bed, the kind of small comfort you cling to after walking through weather like that. While the kettle boiled, I heard a knock. Not loud, just a single knock on the front door. At first, I thought I imagined it, but then it came again, this time softer. It was nearly midnight. Nobody comes by at that time, and I didn't order anything. I went to the door and checked the peephole. No one. Just an empty porch and falling snow. When I opened the door to check outside, the porch was empty. The steps were empty. The whole walkway was untouched. No footprints, no tire tracks, no sign anyone had been near my house. I shut the door, locked it again, and went back for my coffee. Before I even made it halfway down the hall, the knock came again. This time sharper, more deliberate. I spun around and went straight back to the door. Again, nothing through the peephole. But when I opened the door this time, something was there. 2 small rocks sitting on the porch, side by side. I leaned out and looked around. Still no one. I called out, asking who was there, but no one answered. I stepped back inside, locked the door again, and tried to calm myself. I told myself it had to be neighborhood kids messing around, or someone losing it from holiday stress. People get strange around December. I took my coffee and went to my bedroom. I kept the hallway light on. And after a while, the warmth made me tired. I don't remember falling asleep. All I remember next is waking to a loud crash. I shot upright, confused, and still half asleep. For a second, I thought maybe ice fell off the roof or something. But then I saw it. A rock on the bedroom floor. A fist-sized one. My window was shattered, snow blowing in, curtains moving. I walked slowly to the window and looked out across the yard. There was that same person from the station, the Santa guy, standing in my yard, right below my window. His head tilted back, looking straight at me, like he had been waiting for me to wake up. I didn't wait. I grabbed my phone and called the police immediately. They told me to lock my bedroom door and stay inside. I locked the door and backed away. But at the same time, I couldn't stop checking. I kept glancing through the broken window, trying to see if he was still there. 1 second he was standing there. The next, he wasn't. Just gone. I ran to the other windows in the house, checking each one. The living room, the kitchen, the hallway. Every angle of the yard I could see. But I saw nothing. Just white snow covering everything. I went to the front door but didn't open it. I just looked through the peephole. There was something sitting on the porch. A gift box, wrapped in holiday paper, a red bow on top. I didn't open the door. I waited for the police to show up. It felt like forever. When they finally pulled up outside, lights flashing through the snow, I unlocked the door and opened it only when I saw them right there on the porch. I told them everything, every detail from the walk home. They checked the yard and the street. No prints or marks in the snow except for their own. They said maybe the heavy snowfall covered tracks quickly. Maybe the man ran through the woods. One officer picked up the gift box and opened it. It was completely empty. They figured it was probably a prank or someone messing around. But I knew better. I told them the man followed me from the station. I told them he stood right there in my yard. They listened, but I could see from their faces they didn't know what to make of it. After they left, I locked every door, every window. The storm kept getting worse outside. I tried to sleep in the living room, but barely managed to rest at all. I kept thinking about that empty box. It wasn't anything random. And to this day, I still have no idea who that man was, or what his intention might have been. I was driving back home late in the afternoon, and the snowstorm had already gotten worse than anything the weather report predicted. The main road had started slowing down earlier, but by the time I reached the last stretch, traffic had completely disappeared. The lights were blurry, the trees were bent under the weight of the snow, and the shadows from the woods on both sides felt heavier than usual. A little farther ahead, a large tree had snapped under the wind and fallen across the road. There wasn't any way around it unless I waited hours for emergency crews that probably wouldn't arrive anytime soon. I backed up slowly and turned onto the old pine route, a narrow road that cut straight through the woods. Hardly anyone used it in decent weather, let alone in a storm like this. But I didn't have many options left. I figured if I drove slow enough, I'd eventually reach the main road again farther down. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. The road twisted between tall trees that swayed just enough to creak, and the visibility stayed terrible. At times, I had to lean forward just to understand where the road ended and the trees began. I kept checking the rearview mirror out of habit, even though there was nothing behind me, not a single car. After about 10 minutes of crawling forward, fresh snow started piling fast under the tires. The road hadn't been plowed. I started to wonder if anyone had even passed through this way since the storm started. I hadn't seen a single car, and the road looked completely forgotten. Then the car slowed on its own. The wheels slipped, spun, and sank a little. I pressed the gas gently, but the tires only kicked up slush. I tried again. Same thing. The car leaned slightly to one side, and that's when I realized it wasn't going anywhere. Snow had built up beneath the frame, and the tires were just digging deeper. I put it in park and sat still for a moment. The wind pushed against the car. I turned on the hazard lights, even though I doubted anyone would see them. My phone signal flickered, but I managed to call roadside assistance. The person on the other end told me to stay inside, but I wanted to check the road behind me. Maybe another driver would pass by eventually. I stepped out into the cold with my phone's flashlight on. The snowflakes reflected the beam so harshly that the light barely traveled a few feet. I wrapped my jacket tighter and walked slowly back down the road. My boots sank with every step. The snow was getting deeper by the minute. I didn't see any headlights in either direction. No marks on the road. No sound except the wind sliding through the trees. After a few minutes, the cold numbed my fingers even through my gloves, and the wind felt stronger. There was no point walking farther, so I turned around and headed back to the car. I expected to see nothing but untouched snow around the vehicle, just the tracks I made on the way out. But the moment the car came back into view, I stopped walking. The snow surrounding it wasn't smooth anymore. There were footprints, a lot of them. They circled the car in several loops, crisscrossing over each other. Some were close to the doors, some were behind the car, some were on the driver's side near the window. I hadn't walked like that. I only stepped out and walked straight down the road. These prints weren't mine. I looked around slowly. There were no other cars, no fresh tire tracks, nothing that suggested anyone had passed by. The snowfall was heavy enough that it should have erased new tracks almost instantly, yet these looked clear, recent. and they were different sizes. Some looked deeper, like the person who made them had been standing still for a while. Some were lighter, like someone had been walking quietly. I didn't want to stay outside any longer. I walked back toward the car quickly, keeping the light pointed at the ground. Everything felt quiet in a way that didn't match the storm anymore. Then, just as I reached the driver's side door, I heard something behind the car. Slow footsteps. Snow packing under someone's weight. I froze. I didn't turn around. Whoever, or whatever, was behind the car was moving carefully, almost like they were trying not to be heard. I pulled the door open, got in, and shut it fast. I pushed the gear into drive and pressed the gas harder than before. The tires spun, the car shook, and for a second I thought it wasn't going to move. Then it lurched forward. The frame scraped through the packed snow. I rocked the car again, then again, and finally it broke free. I kept driving, not caring how fast the tires slid or how much the car swayed. I didn't look at the mirrors. I just kept my eyes on the thin line of road ahead, until the trees finally thinned and distant lights appeared through the snow. I pulled into a gas station near the main road and parked under the dim roof lights. I sat there for a minute, letting the heater warm the cabin. When I finally stepped out, the first thing I noticed was the back of the car. There were marks on it. Long, uneven scratches running across the trunk and rear bumper. They were pale against the dark paint, and snow clung to them like they'd been made only moments before I arrived. They weren't from branches or ice. They looked deliberate, like someone had used something thin and sharp. I reported everything to the police the next morning. They asked me to explain exactly where it happened, so I traced the route on a map and pointed out the stretch along the Pine Road. They said they'd check it out, and that was it for a while. A few days later, one of the officers called me back. He asked again about where I got stuck, then asked if I had left the car at any point. I told him I'd walked back a little but didn't go off the road. Then he explained what they found. There had been a cabin somewhere near that part of the woods decades ago. Old records showed it belonged to a couple who went missing during a winter storm. People searched for them for weeks, but nothing turned up except smoke from a fire. The cabin burned down before anyone reached it, and the case faded over time because nothing else was ever discovered. The only thing left was the foundation buried under the trees and snow. The officer said they didn't know the exact spot anymore because nature reclaimed it a long time ago. But during their search, they found signs of something near the edge of the road. Disturbed snow, like someone had been walking near the tree line. He told me they weren't sure what I saw or heard. Maybe it was someone living deep in the woods, even though there hadn't been any reports of anyone staying out there. Maybe it was an animal, even though the prints didn't match anything they could identify right away. But before hanging up, he added one last thing. He said the pattern of footprints I described, circling the car, staying close, moving quietly, matched some details from the old investigation that were never shared publicly. The search team back then had also found footprints around the burned cabin. Several sets, some large, some small, all circling the building in wide loops before the fire. The prints had been fresh even though the fire had already burned out, and no other tracks led away from the site. I didn't say anything after he told me that. There wasn't anything to add. The call ended, and I set the phone down. Since then, I haven't taken that route again. I avoid that whole section of the woods whenever the weather turns bad. Early December always has a quiet feeling to it. Cold air settling in, nights stretching longer, and the world outside my windows turning pale and frozen. I've always liked that quiet. But that night, that quiet felt wrong. I woke up without knowing why. My eyes just opened to the darkness of my room, and for a moment, I didn't move. A faint sound drifted down the hallway. Something soft, distant, and out of place. It sounded like it came from the dining room. My first thought was that something had fallen. Maybe something shifted because of the cold. Houses make noises like that sometimes. I tried to convince myself of that as I sat up, listening. Then it came again. A dull shuffle, then a faint scrape. I froze where I was, letting my eyes adjust to the dark. Then I swung my legs off the bed, moved slowly to the door, and cracked it open just enough to look out. The hallway was dark, except for a thin gray glow coming from the small window near the staircase. Snow was still falling outside. Quiet, steady, relentless. I stepped out, careful not to make a sound, and made my way to the living room. The sound didn't repeat. Everything felt still. For a second, I wondered if I imagined the whole thing. But when I passed the front window, something out in the yard caught my eye. I stepped closer to the window, brushing the curtain aside just enough to see. There was a snowman in the middle of the yard, huge, taller than any I'd ever made. Too perfectly shaped, too smooth, the kind of shape you don't get by rolling snow in the yard. It looked carved, deliberate, and it was facing the house. Its head was tilted upward, pointed toward my window. My stomach dropped. I hadn't built anything. No one had been in the yard earlier. I would have noticed. I glanced back toward the staircase, listening again. I should have called someone right then, but I needed to know what made the noise. Needed to know if someone had actually been in the house, or if I was creeping myself out for no reason. I moved slowly toward the dining room. The closer I got, the colder the air felt. When I reached the doorway, I leaned in and looked around. Everything looked normal. Chairs, table, shelves. Everything was where it should be. I let out a slow breath and turned toward the kitchen, and that's when I heard it. The faint, unmistakable sound of a door handle moving. The handle on the kitchen door leading to the hall rattled, just once, like someone turned it lightly. I froze. The door didn't open, but someone was inside. I stepped backwards slowly, keeping my eyes on the dark kitchen doorway. Every instinct told me not to make a sound, not to let whoever was there know where I was. I moved back toward my room, heart steady but sharp, as if each beat came with a warning behind it. When I reached my room, I slipped inside and locked the door quietly. I didn't turn the lights on. I sat on the floor, my back against the bed, and pulled out my phone. I dialed for help with my hand shaking. I whispered that someone was inside the house. They told me to stay where I was and stay quiet. The minutes after that felt longer than anything I've ever experienced. Every sound in the house felt magnified. The wind pushing against the siding, the soft tick of the heater, the faint shift of the wooden frame. Then, after what felt like forever, flashing lights painted the snow outside my window. I heard voices shouting from outside, then the front door opening loud and fast. Heavy boots moved through the hallway. Only when someone knocked on my bedroom door and said they were there did I unlock it. They searched every room, every closet, under every counter. No one was inside. But something was wrong in the kitchen. One of the windows was open, wide enough for someone to slip through. Snow had blown in along the counter, and the drawers, the cupboards. Nearly everything inside them was gone, almost like someone had taken the time to carefully remove things rather than grab and run. The officers exchanged glances but didn't say much about it. They checked the yard too. The snowman was still there, but it looked different. There was a red scarf wrapped around its neck, a scarf I'd never seen before. The officers took it with them when they left, promising to look into everything. Before going, they told me to keep my doors locked and to call again if anything else happened. When they left, the house felt too quiet again, but this time it wasn't peaceful. It felt watched. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I thought about the sound that woke me up. For the next few days, I tried to go about things as normally as possible, but I couldn't shake the feeling from that night. I'd walk past a window and feel like something outside was watching the house. Anytime the wind blew snow against the siding, I felt my skin crawl. And every night before bed, I started checking the windows twice, then checking the doors again, making sure each lock was tight. Even when everything was secure, I still felt that cold from the night I woke up, like something had stepped into the house, moving through the hallway. For days after that, I kept checking the yard. The snowman stayed exactly where it was, slowly shrinking with each passing day as the cold shifted and the weather changed. But sometimes, in the middle of the night when the house was silent again, I'd wake up the same way I had that night. No reason, no sound, just my eyes opening. And even now, Months later, I can't shake the certainty that someone was in the house that night. And something about that snowman wasn't right. There's something I've kept to myself, something I never told the officers. When I first saw the snowman that night, the scarf wasn't the only new thing about it. There were faint marks on the snow around its base, not footprints, not drag marks. But the snow around it was packed down in a perfect circle, as if something heavy had been standing there. Something tall, that didn't need footsteps to get where it wanted to be. And I still don't know if that snowman was made by someone, or if something else built itself from the snow and watched me through my window.